Okay, well, that was exhausting. Put a few dots on my Fitbit as well. Well, hi, this is Jeff with Sketchy Wisdom, and you've probably already guessed that the topic of the day is trust. And for purposes of today's discussion, we're talking about really two things. Trust that the American people should have or be able to have in their elected officials, and a trust which is a legal and financial arrangement to allow that to happen. Now, you may or may not be aware that our incoming president-elect, Donald J. Trump, in addition to declining to reveal his tax returns, as nearly all of his recent predecessors have done voluntarily, has also declined the customary act of placing his personal wealth in a blind trust, which is to say, placing them out of his immediate control for the duration of his time in the White House. Now, there are a number of reasons why this is desirable, not least of which is to avoid the appearance of impropriety, of influence peddling, but also to allow the American public to be assured that he's got his eye on the ball. That is to say, that he's doing the people's business and not his own. So these are the reasons why customarily trusts are set up to separate the elected official from their personal wealth, and that not only goes for the president. It has gone in the past for vice presidents, cabinet members, and other appointed officials as well. And that's particularly applicable to this incoming bunch, who together represent billions and billions of real wealth in the financial sector, in the military-industrial complex, and etc. So the question remains, will these ladies and gentlemen agree to separate themselves from control of their holdings for the duration of their stay in the White House and federal offices, or will they not? And even if they do, to what extent does that give us confidence or trust that their enormous wealth will not yield undue influence on themselves and those with whom they interact on behalf of the public? So what I'd like to do today is kind of explain in a very elementary way what a trust is, what it's supposed to do, and the particulars of a flavor of trust called a discretionary trust, which is generally used for this purpose. So in order to do that, I'm going to utilize some visual aids here. Let's say this is President-elect Donald J. Trump. And for purposes of a trust, which is simply a legal arrangement, a contract, a set of documents that talks about the disposition of assets, that is, a pile of wealth, real property, real assets, material assets, financial assets, what have you, of which Don obviously has a great heaping pile. I mean, he might as well be Smaug, the dragon, sitting on top of this great, as so he says. We don't know for sure. But were he to agree to placing his assets in trust for the duration of his stay in the White House, he would be referred to for purposes of the trust as the grantor. That is, the person who's granting control over his assets to another individual or group. The next individual in our cast of characters regarding a trust is the trustee. Now, the trustee is the person to whom the grantor grants control over his or her wealth. As a trustee, this person manages those assets according to the provisions of the trust document. So this person is very, very important. He holds, as we say, fiduciary responsibility for those assets, for all accounting, for tax purposes, etc. In addition, there may be one or more beneficiaries of the trust. In this arrangement, a beneficiary is simply someone named in the trust document or agreement who can expect some benefit from that trust. Now, generally speaking, the way a trust works is actually fairly simple. you have a grantor, as we said, in this case, President-elect Trump, who happens to have a great fat pile that he's sitting on. So let's let this bucket of sunflower seeds represent the assets entire of one Donald J. Trump, President-elect of the United States. At some point, let's say that Donald comes to his senses and realizes that for appearance's sake, if for nothing else, he has to at least separate himself from immediate control of those assets. Not ownership, but simply immediate control. So he engages, through a battery of attorneys, I'm sure, one or more trustees. And he goes to that individual or that body and says, hey, look, would you take control of this bucket full of sunflower seeds for me, and until such time as I get tired of being president? Will you do that for me? And of course, the trustee agrees. Signatures are applied, an agreement is reached, and all is well. Now, at this point, the grantor of the trust supposedly is more or less out of picture with regard to control over those assets. In addition, a beneficiary may be waiting in the wings either to inherit or to receive periodic disbursements or benefit in some way from the proceeds of the trust in whatever way is nominated by that trust. So the trust goes along. The trustee is responsible for controlling, managing, perhaps investing those assets and seeing them grow. If this is set up as a discretionary trust, then the trustee actually has wide latitude in terms of what to do with these funds. He could potentially make disbursements or payments out of the funds at any time to a beneficiary, to himself, and this is the bit that could be potentially troubling, payments from the trust assets to the grantor, who is supposed to be separated from them in the first place. So it is this particular aspect that could make the common discretionary trust a little bit troubling for this purpose, even though this flavor of trust is more or less customary. So by now I hear you saying, all right, Jeff, what's up with the puppet show? Why should I care? Well, it just so happens that the OGE, the Office of Governmental Ethics, is at this moment accepting public comment on this whole topic of discretionary trusts and their effectiveness in building up public trust in our elected officials and preventing apparent or actual conflicts of interest. This is a real opportunity, friends, to let our voices be heard. Now, do not take my little dissertation here as the be-all and end-all of understanding of trusts. They are very complex indeed. Now, fortunately, there's a wealth of information out there on Investopedia.com, Forbes.com. All consumer-level investment and financial sites will have some information on trusts and how they work. Educate yourself and comment to OGE by March 6th of this year, that is 2017. And make your voice heard, because otherwise, we're just toys and puppets. For Sketchy Wisdom, I'm Jeff Clothier.
Just who do ya?